Here's a multiplying and dividing decimals review. You're going to take these notes in a physical notebook. You remember what those things were? You copy the title down at the very top. So here's my notebook. We're going to put the title, which was the multiplying and dividing decimals. We're going to only copy the examples. There's going to be example 1, example 2, and then there's something called a U try. The examples get copied, and the U try you don't need to copy, you just need to try it. The main idea is when I kind of unpack it for us, but you aren't going to copy the main idea. You're just going to watch it. So main idea, tenths of hundreds is what I like to call this. Let's say that this is our problem. 4/10 times 5/100. When we write that as fractions, it's going to look like this. Then when we multiply it, I end up with 20 thousandths. When I go to multiply this as a decimal, you'll notice that I'm not lining up my decimals. That's because I didn't need a common denominator. I know that you're used to hearing denominators just with fractions, but think about them in terms of decimals now too. These, the denominator is hundredths and tenths. They don't need to be common. I'm going to multiply those numerators, how many pieces of them there are, and there's 20. And then I'm going to count the decimal places to help us multiply our denominator. 2 decimal places here, 1 here, 1, 2, 3. And sure enough, in the very end, I still get 20 thousandths. It works the same way as fractions. So when I have, actual longer numbers as part of the numbers that I'm going to be multiplying, I don't line up the decimals here either. For my first problem, I'm going to put the longer number on top because that's going to be less rows that I have to work with here. I multiply 2 by 6, that gives me 12. 2 by 4 gives me 8, plus 1 is 9, and 2 times 2 is 2. Once I'm done with the 2, and I'm ready to move on to the 5, I need a placeholder value here. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 3 is 23. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. Now I add these. I get a final answer of 7,592, but I have to account for those decimal places. That means my actual final answer is 7 and 592 thousandths. For B, I again am going to put the longer number on top and not line up my decimals. When I go to multiply, I start with that first 3 and multiply it by each number here. And for that first row, I get 1,437. For my second row, I take that second 3 and multiply it, but I need that placeholder value first. Go figure, I'm going to get the same answers. 3 times 9 is 27, carry the 2. 3 times 7 is 21, plus 2 is 23. And 3 times 4 is 12, plus 2 is 14, which makes sense because I had the same number being multiplied each time. When I add them together, I get a final sum of 15,807. I need to move my decimal 3 places, giving me 15,000 or 15 and 807 thousandths as my final answer. Here's another main idea. Now again, the main idea, you don't need to copy, you're just watching. When you practice moving a decimal, when you're dividing, what this means is that you're multiplying by 10. Think of it this way. If I have 10 divided by 2, that gives me 5. You could also multiply by 10, and it's still going to give me 5 because 10 times 10 is 100, and 100 divided by 2 times 10, which is 20, is still 5. If I'm multiplying the dividend and the divisor by 10, it's going to give me that same answer. So what does this mean in terms of decimals? Well, if I have a decimal in a long division problem, I can move that decimal 2 places by multiplying by 10 twice and multiply by 10 twice here as well. And it's going to give me that same answer that I would have gotten if I had been able to do this in my head. 2 goes into 100 50 times, gives me 100 even, which means 2 hundredths goes into 1 50 times. Here's 2 problems for you to copy into your notebook. The first number is going to go inside of the long division right here, and then the second number goes on the outside. Now, I think that it's helpful once you move that decimal and match it, that you slide those numbers down and rewrite them without the decimals. 14 goes into 5,600 exactly 4 times, or it goes into 56 4 times. And you'll notice I get 0. Well, I'm not done. The decimal's all the way back here, so we need to fill those with placeholder values. So my final answer is 400. For B, I start out with 1.08. I'm dividing by 1.5. I move the decimal and match it. And you'll see that I still have a decimal over here between the 10 and the 8, and that's okay. I rewrite it underneath, 15 into 10.8. And I know that 15 can't go into 10 evenly, but it can go into 108. 15 goes into 108 7 times, and I get 105. I subtract and get 3, add a 0, bring it down, and 15 goes into 30 twice. So my final answer is this goes in 72 hundredths times. Here's 2 problems for you to try on your own. First, you're going to pause the video. Then you try the problems on your own. Then you play to check your answers. If you're not sure how to get started, you can always play a little bit, peek, and then rewind and get back to this blank slate so that you can practice trying it without the teacher helping you at all. All right, number 1. I'm going to put the longer number on top and the shorter number on the bottom. 6 times 4 is 24. Carry the 2. 1 times 6 is 6 plus 2 is 8. And then 6 times 0 is 0. We didn't even need to do that part. Next, I hold my placeholder value. Then 5 times 4 is 20. Carry the 2. 5 times 1 is 5. Plus 2 is 7. When I go to add them, I get 784. Now, don't forget, we have 2 decimal places. So my final answer to my original problem is 7 84 hundredths. For my second problem, the 10.8 goes on the inside. The 24 hundredths goes on the outside. I move my decimal twice, and that means I have to match it, so I have a placeholder value now here. I always think it's helpful to rewrite the problem now that we've gotten rid of the decimals. So 24 divided into 1,080. Now, 24 isn't going to go into 1. It's also not going to go into 10, but it does go into 108, and it goes 4 times. 4 times 24 is 96. I subtract and bring down the 0. And 24 is going to go into 120 5 times, gives me exactly 120, and I get 0. My decimal is after the 45, meaning my final answer is 45 as a whole number.